and the religious traditions or spirituality or philosophy to truly bring those to bear on how models express themselves, how these systems are deployed, where they are from the metal to the screen, yeah, and everything in between.
This is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen.
Okay, good day, everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. And as always, I'm delighted with today's guest who will introduce himself. Ben, please go ahead. And so great to have you today.
Maurice, thanks for having me. So it's wonderful to be talking and listening. I think we're sitting here, but so we met today. We met originally through this work I do now on this interreligious and technology space, but I've always thought there's a little bit of a restless traveler in myself, a sojourner, creative, a generator, and someone who likes to chart new territory. And I think this kind of comes from my background. I was born in Chicago, and so like all good things, we now know that good things come from Chicago with the new pope. So I'm certainly excited about that. But once I was kind of in that growing up from 0 to 5, I would travel in the summers to lakes around the Midwest, and so there was this special lake called Pleasant Lake, and my grandfather Jack would take us out really every day, and I was one of those kids that would wake up before sunrise, and somehow I would just knew when that was, and then I would go all the way to sunset and stay out there fishing the whole day and just finding new spots, going in the boat, going on the pier, and the frogs are interesting, but I was out for the big fish,
Mm.
and so there's that kind of obsession,
Yeah,
and
you mentioned us, Ben. So you were not alone in the boat
no, no. So my grandfather would
as
often
well.
take me.
Okay.
Yeah,
Any
yeah, yeah.
siblings? Do you have any
So
siblings?
I do. I have 4 other siblings, and
Hmm.
so I am one of the 4 boys, and there's a girl who's the oldest. So yeah, she's really special. Love all my siblings, and they were a big part of my life there. So they were also doing the same, although in different ways. There's more perhaps riding around or hunting or there's those kinds of things, but it would just be like I was just focused, and the there that kind of fisherman attitude, and along with I think to kind of evolve over the years into this. Maybe I'll bring it into my faith tradition as is like a almost evangelist or trying to find and baptize all nations in that sense, from
Hmm.
the Christian tradition. And so over the years, I found myself in these various tech roles, and I'm preaching the good news of whatever the company wants, and over time turn that into like AI ethics, and we'll talk about this more.
Hmm.
But really, I think there's this love of finding the next big thing, and also bringing this kind of contemplative stillness into my work too. So I blend these worlds of technology, religion, spirituality, and multi-faith work, of course, but also from the earliest days in my tech work, it was like, how do I bring my philosophy and ethics and to bear on what I'm doing in the day to day, and that snowballed into who I am and what I do now.
Okay. When you were mentioning in terms of, that whatever you did, you try to, convince people that this is good and etc. So what I understood from your first remarks is that that was kind of part of family values as well, or not?
Exactly, yeah, good intuition there. So my father was a pastor, so
Oh,
there's
okay.
there's that. So I
Mm-hmm.
grew up with that environment.
Yeah.
But he also, in my time, maybe about middle school onward, was very much just in the tech world. So he transitioned from a professor to a pastor to technologist because he was in the business school at Seattle University, and so there's a he also kind of crossed over these disciplinary paths and life paths and started his own company when I was very young, and so he had his own consultancy and modeled for me kind of that integration of how you live both like a life of faith and a life in technology. And so there's also a little bit of nepotism there because I did get my first gig out of philosophy degree from Seattle Pacific University with said company. So that was helpful in my journey to find, of course, the way into technology. Uh, but yeah, the short version of that transition is, and we could expand on this if you'd like, but I think philosophy is a great preparation for anything technology related or anything really having to think and reason carefully. But also there's such beauty and heart in the deepest traditions of philosophy that it really make it so that you can not only logic chop and code and program, but you
Mm-hmm.
can think holistically, think through things. And I think we recently seen the Anthropic, one of the co-founders of Anthropic, uh, speak on this about how humanities is going to make a comeback, and so I think that's certainly going to be the case.
Can we take one step back to your upbringing?
Please.
So, you know, yeah, can you maybe then, in short, describe, at the dinner table, what type of conversations, or did you have conversations? And if so, what type of conversations were taking place?
Well, I think given the age ranges, there's everything from my sister, a decade plus older, and my younger brother, he's a few years younger. So there's a gap there. I think we very much were just into uh, kind of this mix of like fun and fantasy, science fiction, kind of imagining different worlds, but also yes, we love food and that was always been a part of it. We have this big round table that's like the familial, like the family table. And
Hmm.
so it's not no rectangles. We got this round with like a nice spade thing in the middle. We learned that from our neighbor friends who were Chinese and had that tradition at their house and passed
Hmm.
it on to us. And so that kind of became like we were, knights of the round. We even would bring at some point you turned 18 and my father got really into the whole uh coming of age
Hmm.
stuff that yeah, it was the rage maybe a decade or two ago. Well, two plus decades. I'm doing the math, but he would have a sword forged for each child, and we'd bring the sword and put it on the table, and little knights of the round. Some of that. So there's this certainly this idea. Maybe going back to my first comment, just that
Hmm.
there's like we're sojourners in this land, and we
Hmm.
have a mission and purpose we're not just winding down a river willy nilly. We're
Yeah.
in a river for a reason and going someplace together. Yeah.
Okay. No, thanks for sharing that. Before I ask you then maybe and you alluded a little bit to that as well in your journey in terms of, where you studied and the different things that you did. But before I ask you to go there, you were describing that you have a couple of siblings. What are they doing? Because I'm always fascinated. How does it happen, in families that one goes this direction and the other one the other direction, or that they are ending up in the same field? How is it with
Mm,
your family, with your siblings?
mhm, mhm. Well, it's a fun one. I'll go through linearly with
Mm-hmm.
my sister doing some government work and school work, my brother a lawyer, my other brother a theologian.
Yeah.
My youngest brother is working kind of more in blue collar kind of construction, Home Depot, that kind of like that orbit of things. And so I think that we run the gamut of professions in the family, and and it is funny how we kind of dispersed
Yeah.
in those like five different ways as five children. Yeah, and one's in the Midwest, one's a little bit north of me, one is over Montana, the other's on the East Coast, and so
I
it's
know.
yeah, even in a very literal sense, there's like a dispersion of the siblings that happened. I've stayed close to my parents are nearby, and that's very helpful with four children. But just in terms of how close we are, we talk often and
Hmm.
see each other when we can. Yeah.
Okay. And you just got a little baby, right? Was that your first, or you have more
No, so
children?
this is our fourth child.
Fourth.
So
Okay.
yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We have four children, and they're ranging from middle school down to newborn. So yeah, talking to you with very little sleep, that's just the normal thing though these days. So there's other ways to deal with that.
Yeah.
Uh,
And if I ask you, what is the one thing that you try to, pass on to your kids, what you have, gotten from your life with your parents?
well, I do think I'm still trying to pass things on. So there's a let's see if I'm successful here. But the I think there's this integrated life that one wants to lead and one desires to, but sometimes it doesn't know. You don't know how to get there, right? And I think there's this. Um, Even my parents, they're still works in progress on that front. But what they model is that um, desire to embody what you believe and to make a difference with what you embody. And I think that is something really important for us specifically. Like I think it's of a Christian flavor. I found my way to Catholicism through my so the first evangelical little stopover, it in Roman Catholicism, Russian Orthodoxy, but I was also practicing yoga and Buddhist meditation, and for a time became a Buddhist meditation teacher. And from there, I went back to my Eastern Catholicism. So it's been a very different kind of zigzaggy journey on that side. And so I think what uh, we both, my wife and I, we both believe and want to practice is this uh, not only integration but witness to what we're here for, and like finding that reason too is something again works in progress. We're always listening, but yeah, that integrated, embodied, witnessing life.
Mm.
Yeah,
Okay. No, thanks for that.
yeah,
Um, okay, let us go. Tell the listeners a little bit in terms of your journey of learning and then working. And then yes, I have a couple of questions around the work that you do now around AI. But yes, take us through it. Your
yeah. So imagine with a philosophy degree, there wasn't much technical background other than I built little computers to play video games. And so I had some leanings and natural inclinations to work with technology, but no real hard skills after exiting college, which is funny. But immediately upon the move to my father's company, he set me up with this guy. I won't name his name, but maybe you'll listen to this someday. But he was he was extremely gruff and tough and many years older, and also um, just like would accept no errors and really forged me in the old school way of technology. So there's not like the new way is compassion and empathy with your coworkers, and we're gonna go to all this training on how to be attuned to your colleagues and inclusive, and that this was like the old school like yell at you and I don't, can I swear on this podcast? I don't know, but I'll attenuate it. So it's like if you ever, I made a mistake one time in coding some SQL, so like database language to manipulate data and move data around, and what happened was uh, we were in front of a client, and I like pressed something, and it just deleted the project. Um, so it's like, like it just I did the classic, like, you
Yeah.
just blow it up, and, he's just like, if you ever do this again, I will, like, fire you from your father's company," you know? So, I'm like, it's like, just one of those guys, so I just
Hilarious.
thought that line has always stuck with me, it's so funny, but, so, yeah, I learned the hard way, with a great mentor. He was a great
Mhm.
mentor, in terms of the actual skills of the job, the technical skills, and subsequently, became friends. He was at my wedding, and so
Mm.
we it's like there's learning both how to work with somebody very different from yourself,
Yeah.
and also, yeah, like some work just takes specific things to know, and
Mhm.
so from there, I think it was this journey of kind of progression through that data world. So you can think of it like there are people who move data bits around, right? There are people who like build data into things. There are people who show what the data shows, and that's like data visualization. There are people who really move to the next step and try to get insight and take action based on what you see the data doing, and so that's kind of like the natural progression of the data profession. And I sort of progressed through all of that, learning how to
Mhm.
master the craft and of what was called business intelligence. So I taught data visualization and business intelligence at the University of Washington. At a certain point, I was a practice director. I built, lots of teams around this space. I delivered in companies like T-Mobile, Costco, Microsoft, and more. And so it's like this life as a data consultant, data professional, was going very well. This was also around about 5+ years into that space. It started to turn into data science and machine learning. This, those were
Mm.
the new hot things. Of course, they've been around for a long time, but in terms of the mainstream of like what people would choose as a profession or study or in mass, uh, and of course, machine learning then turned into AI. It was kind of like
Mm.
how we talked about it naturally,
And
and
just for a
yeah.
second, Ben, just for the listeners, so uh, what are the years that we are talking about here? So how many years ago was this?
Yeah, like you can think 2009,
Mm.
2010, kind of the earliest days of my
Okay.
career. And then, yeah, like plus 5 years. So 2015, thereabouts. Like I was like, after really trying to make the progression through all those companies, build my skills and become a practice director,
Uh-huh.
selling, hiring, building, all that with all that's about roughly that time frame. And then, uh, there's a certain point where, I thought I learned enough, I can start my own thing. So founded my own little consultancy called Analytics Guild, which doesn't exist anymore. But I started that, did some work for some clients, but quickly got hired into Microsoft for my skill set. So uh, that's where things really both shifted for me in terms of my focus, and my career continued to accelerate. So uh, yeah, but, I'll give a quick story is that in my second role at Microsoft, so this is like very quickly after I got hired. So I transitioned out of the team I got hired into.
Uh-huh.
I went to another team, and in that team I was building courses. So I started to build the data science, data analytics, machine learning curricula for Microsoft, where it's like, the courses would get 500,000, a million people taking them. It was just like the big heyday of MOOCs. So we worked with this company called edX. And so I built Microsoft's first data analytics track, and then, data science, and was the lead on like creating those courses. Sometimes it would be me myself. It would be working with experts. But there was a moment where, and this is like maybe I'll put the year on 2016, 2017. this is where I was like, my ethics work, my philosophy background, like is there a way to blend these worlds in my current role? And so I proposed the first AI ethics course for Microsoft and for the industry, really, I think from big technology companies, to build that for the public. And then the story is like we partnered with Seattle University. I had like a couple professors, myself, and we were doing this back and forth. If you look at it now, it's really not good, but like it's just dated in the way that those things evolved. And so I think it still exists. If it doesn't, it's okay. The uh, what that did is both, yeah, like sure, like many people took that course and were able to be have their thinking changed. But I think what then happened was the AI ethics work externally became something that I worked on full time internally. So it was like it caught the eye of Chief Scientific Officer Eric Horvitz and the Microsoft research group called Ether, which is AI ethics and research group inside of Microsoft that advises on tough cases and also researches. And um, it put me at the nexus of like product and
Yeah.
legal and research and all that with the really the first wave of what we now call responsible AI. So I said AI ethics, but the industry typically refers to that as responsible AI. And that was even a shift that I personally went through because I originally was like, Eric, I do AI ethics. I taught AI ethics course on this thing, and I have this vision for how we could teach all employees at Microsoft on ethics, like that would change the world. And he's like, it's responsible AI. So it's like we changed that to that term.
Can I ask you a question about that though? Because I heard you mention that you said, and in the beginning of 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 this, you said I was trying how could I combine my philosophical, learnings with what I'm doing now. Um, I think there was more to it than or how can I combine because I also have this. So
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
and what I'm trying to get to is. Um, Was there really a moment when you realized that this is not just technical work, this is also moral work? So that's one part. And then the other part is um, so you have helped to shape some of the earliest responsible AI standards, right?
Yes.
And so what did you see inside big tech that most people outside don't understand? Sorry,
Mm.
it's there are two questions that I have for you.
Two questions. No, I can handle. I can play. Yeah, on the first one, what comes to mind for me is there was, and this isn't like a exact moment, but I'll just paint a little picture of there was a time where with like data work and tech work, really like the ethics stuff didn't come into the picture, except if you were talking about like corporate commitments, let's say, or you know, legal this or legal that. But I think this moral sense, let's call it like this, like moral sense and moral judgment, uh, that deeper sense of the word ethical, uh, like to me is starting to really pop when I would look at things like data visualization tools would advance and yet what we would see is like misuse of charts to like skew voting results or like look at like a poll and see how you can shape a chart to lie, right? I think there's this sense of like, oh, like uh just because it's in front of you doesn't mean it's it's true, right? Like like what you see isn't exactly what you get if you're not being critical. This criticality, I think, is something, really central to the moral, ethical judgment toolkit of a technologist of anyone really. Um, but I think that just in my time, teaching at University of Washington and seeing the students kind of light bulbs click of like oh like if you zero out a chart in a certain way, you can like make things bigger or smaller. and like start to skew what people see, even if the data is quote unquote correct, right? Like you started at 40 instead of zero, and so I think that was a one moment, but uh, for the reason I started that AI ethics course or started to build that at Microsoft, I think just really does come from being trained carefully in like in philosophy, and then also like I had a very interdisciplinary experience at Seattle Pacific University. This was a time before that university, the university doesn't really do this now, but it was kind of like a choose your own adventure scholars honors program that I was a part of that basically meant I created this philosophy degree that was like philosophy plus like lots of theology plus classics, Greek and Latin, trip to Oxford, like found like a formational trip to Oxford really for a semester and immersive in all the things that I deeply care about. And I think there was this being formed in that way, like I think really changed how I could approach these questions a little bit just differently at the time, at the right inflection point, right? It's like who I am plus the circumstances at hand kind of meant that I did that. Like that's how I think about it. It's like the AI ethics course was like a manifestation of like both my formation and like the inevitability of like crashing against the 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 technology as it started to kind of uh be more capable, right? Of the system started to become more capable. Therefore, things like uh, bias in legal cases, for
Uh,
example, like kind of racism or bias embedded in models. Like we were we used to talk about it more in algorithms, right? Like algorithmic bias. Now we talk about it as model bias, but recidivism and that there's a whole pace around that, just around like how court judgment systems like really have to be careful on that subject. And so we use like case studies like that that
mhm.
were already kind of starting to happen because the technology was accelerating. And I mean, now we zoom forward what 8 years, and it's been a definite ramp up in terms of its acceleration. But that those are the two answers I got.
Okay. Yeah, piggybacking further on uh, AI and then around moral authority. So if I ask you, so be honest, who holds the moral authority in AI?
Mhm, mhm.
And
Well,
then and yeah, what would be your answer? Is it engineers, it's companies, governments, society?
yeah, and let me go back to the second question's kind of
Hmm.
last part there because I think there's I'll bridge it a little bit for
Okay.
us. So, what is the thing that people don't know about
Uh-huh.
big tech, that
Yeah.
aren't on the inside? I think uh, there's a picture of like kind of us versus them that gets painted, and Um, yes, I've been guilty of this, and my current work. We'll get to that about the various ways I try to move beyond that. But I think there's this sense of an us versus them when it comes to like big tech employees don't care about ethics, or uh, they think about it a certain way that just means that they'll never consider uh, morals in their work. It's all about growth and metrics and so on. Um, I think everybody has that kind of both inner and still small voice, and also has their own thresholds for what they view as right or wrong. But what happens is that um, you know, one, I think everybody thinks that they're ethical and they're moral. Uh, Two, everybody is justifying whatever they're doing. I mean, if they're otherwise they wouldn't be there. But three, like are not actively trying to sabotage like particular groups or particular peoples. They're just like they just ignore it, or they're not focused, right? I think there's sort of a telescopic uh, thing that happens where in order to see farther, sometimes you have to focus and and there's old Buddhist kind of conception of like what you attend to is what you become. This sense of that, and so like on the one hand, there are companies that like really focus on things like growth. I say my time at Meta showed me that, so I did go. I'll just mention briefly that I after I did all that AI ethics stuff, beginning the first wave, I went to Meta and that's a whole experience. I was one of the first hires of the responsible innovation team there that was formed that was very quickly dissolved because let's just say sometimes that's not a focus of that company. So like that's the case. But you know, I think they innovate that are they doing it responsibly. We were there to try to help solve that
Mm.
be a difference there. We like to think that we made some difference. But I think again it goes back to this point of widening the aperture. That's what responsibly I did in the beginning. It's like we had 6 principles, transparency, privacy, fairness, accountability, like these principles that expanded the Overton window or the conceptual space of like what technologists listen to and what they see, what they bring in, right? In the bias case, it's like, well, you should work with different communities. Let's get the data set to be richer. Let's like put red lines against where we shouldn't go, um, and that's been effective, right? I think that as far as I can tell, uh, there's in that specific case that's both been overturned and changed and all that. But I think in terms of the overall ability of us to mitigate bias in the system, and bias is just one of many issues. Interpretability is another one, especially now with large language models. But what I'm trying to say is, in the case of most technologists inside companies, it's not a problem uh, of explicitly being anti this or anti that. It's most of the time um, a sin of omission, right? A sin of omission because they don't see far enough. And there's this old German proverb that I love to quote all the time: "Whoever sees more is more right."
Hmm.
And I think Meta isn't wrong in thinking that if we grow, we survive. If we grow, we can innovate. If we focus on growth, we can grow. Those are true things. I think if you do a little analysis and research on like what makes cities survive or institutions, organizations, this kind of comes out of more complexity science. It's that you have to grow to survive, right? But we know that there are different types of growth. If you grow if you grow too fast, if you grow in the wrong direction, if you grow with the wrong cells, it's cancerous, it's mutations, um, it's death in its own way. And then growth without living, I think that's the other thing, and growth without meaning and without deep purpose. Even at Meta, there is a sense that drives the growth that is purpose driven. They have a purpose to connect communities, right? Like they have a purpose to create technologies that um, give people capabilities they haven't had before.
Mhm.
So what I'm trying to say is that the authority or the culpability or the responsibility, all of those things are deeply felt by employees wherever they are. I think internally at these companies, and also they again, a sin of omission is most of the time what happens here, or even just a complete ignorance of the broader aperture, the communities that are impacted, right? And even working directly on issues at Microsoft, at Meta, um, there there's always this distance that is part of the game too, right? Like
Mm.
I um, those who are persecuted are not necessarily those who I know. It's
Sure.
just more I like we can feel into a case or feel into a bug or feel into a potential harm or an actual harm or the ripple effects of major harms, but we don't really know. And so like again the shared ignorance um, is something that what I try to do with my work is break through that, both
Mm,
with teaching, with technical work, of course, and at times even like external work. So like I went to Brussels to help Microsoft comply with a new regulation, and in that case, it's like very practical ethics. It's like, are we going to do what we said we're going to do, right? And then can we defend that to the commission and say that like we think we've done what you want us to do according to this law, but like the law is always one bar, and ethics is more often than not moral judgment, moral requirements are above that. Uh, to the point where even inside of Windows, we started calling this the human bar. So like beyond the legal bar, like what's the human bar, right? And even these days, I'm also thinking about and working on the practical, the technical, the socio-technical, the societal uh, levels of the divine too. So like
mm,
how does religion play into all this? We can get to that too, but
mm,
I think the point being uh, that there's this kind of legal moral minimum that companies comply with, and even if they don't comply, they'll pay fines, and then they'll just continue to grow and survive. That's what we just saw with Meta, which I think was fined what 375 million a few days ago uh, for negligence of youth, right? Like how uh, in a way it it feels a little bit like justice, but in the sense
mm,
of like one mark against the scales. But that that doesn't represent like the money doesn't and will never equal the infinite dignity of the children that were harmed in those
yeah.
various ways. So to think that we can easily balance the um, both culpability, responsibility, authority, kind of all those things together with money is wrong. But yeah,
So,
yeah.
so on the basis of what you just mentioned and you touched upon, you mentioned faith there, and do you think that AI is not only just changing what we do, um, but also maybe what it means to be human?
Yeah, the old adage, "What we do is what we are." I mean, I think that there's that sense of we're continuing to augment our own selves and capabilities with these new capabilities. I just to press a button and have something generated removes the distance of contemplation, of stillness, of response, and I think we're finding that there are people who get that, and there are just people who don't get that yet. That like I think there's uh, a funny old phrase in ethics too of like if you can, it doesn't mean you should. There's a can and an ought gap in the philosophy world, right? But I think when as technologists too, it's like you might be able to do what you just said, but you really don't want to do that for ethical reasons. And so I think there's this removal of some of uh the needful friction within the human experience that I'm most concerned about it is the in the inner life sense of like this isn't about just automating things away or what have you, but I think there's sometimes that's required to have like instant response or instant something instantly happen. I think of like my daughter burning her hand. Like I'm not gonna take a few minutes and think about that one. Like it's really quick response is necessary. Or deadlines are deadlines and the expectations keep rising. But I think there's this wave, and I'll speak specifically about the religious practices intersections now. I see. and I'm actually building tools like this that do provide interfaces for people to ask religious or spiritual questions. Sometimes they're used as either spiritual directors or therapists. Um, in the bad sense, more often than not, they're used as companion, like not this religious tools, but other tools like these, just LLM systems are used as companions. We see that as a very huge issue right now with like Megan Garcia's son, uh, who committed suicide. I'm just thinking of like um, the whole slippery slope of giving away that internal space which Saint Pope John Paul II said that it just this inner life, this inner space of freedom is what anchors and is the root of all of our other freedoms, right? Like and if we um, just eliminate that distance and that gap, and that's where I also have like the neuro issues with Neuralink. It's not just AI, right? It's like if we create like brain computer interfaces uh, that will not respect that or understand that, we can eliminate it, right? We can eliminate things that are subtle. There's an old hermeticist rule of the subtle rules the solid, right? In the deepest sense, this our inner freedom rules the outer um, solid things of this world, and I am concerned that we're one not trying hard enough to understand that that's the case. Is again a closing of aperture, and then two the technical design pattern and like model behavior and all that work to bring the traditions of religion and spirituality to bear on how things should be um, is just still fairly nascent. We're working hard to make that not the case. But I think without that, yeah, we are changing the experience of what it means to be human. Yeah.
Eh, Further building on that, if you think about the global south perspectives, faith communities, or indigenous wisdom, um, how can they help to shape AI differently?
I have only been a little bit south. I've never been so south that I can speak directly to indigenous communities there. And and yet I'll funnel it this way. Uh, I think there's this deep sense of place of uh, my that indigenous communities have, and then integration, like we just kind of open this conversation up with, like an integrated way of living, and my my friend and one of my colleagues in the work I do, Audrey Tong, so she talks about this as commies, kind of like commies as bodies of like almost like spirits that inhabit like the river or that kind of encompass a given thing or a place. This kind of more mystical sense of what it uh, the collective experience of a place um, or the meaning of a thing is really is. And I think that that's to me, there's a sense of uh, nature being integrated in that sense of like a collective intelligence of a different kind. Not just AI is itself a collective intelligence, but what are the other collective intelligences that we should consider and to integrate that into both our knowing and our doing. And I think that especially this indigenous understanding is part of that. I would also say rituals or practices are also of import here, even just like our understanding of our brain and how that relates to AI science and psychedelics. And I think there's a rich territory of like of that. That's a bit more of like the secular take on and or like my own milieu of like what when indigenous is mentioned, it's usually funneled through that kind of colonial perspective. But I think of it like there's why I mentioned psychedelics is in part like a healing or modalities for us that are truly transformative through these other intelligences, right?
Mm.
Is why that's fascinating to me, and I think could have a lot of import on our eventual understanding of what are we doing here with these other intelligences that we're building, and what's the right relationship with those intelligences, and yeah.
Okay. Maybe, um, before we started recording, we were talking about sustainable development goals, and I know you're familiar with that. And again, for the listeners, it's a framework that we developed as a world, as as the next step after we had Millennium Development Goals that were um, established maybe inside of a room by experts, and the Sustainable Development Goals are really the result of more involvement of different people. It's maybe too many goals, but the good thing is it's an effort to say, hey, we are bringing our world into a situation that's not sustainable and not just, and how can we stop that, or how can we improve that further? Now, those goals are not on track. They are maybe on average at 15 to 70%. Um, and then this growing group of people in the world have said, one of the reasons that we are not reaching those goals is a result of uh, that we did not pay proper attention to the ability, skills, and knowledge that you need as an individual as well as a community. And so they further brainstormed around this, and they came up with the need to look at 5 inner development goals: being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting. And under that, they identified 25 skills like empathy, critical thinking, um, resilience. So I have a question for you about the inner development goals. And I know you're not totally familiar, but you're familiar with the concept of inner development, and you're also busy with that, right? And you're interested. So if we connect AI with inner development, with qualities like humility, empathy, etc., um, what kind of AI ecosystem would we build differently?
This certainly goes back to my point about inner freedom and that space and time for response. But I think there's a bit of uh, abstractness there and ephemerality that could be part of my answer. I think what I think the AI ecosystem needs to do at this moment is lean into the wisdom traditions of the past and the present, and the religious traditions or spirituality or philosophy, to truly bring those to bear on how models express themselves, how these systems are deployed, where they are, from the metal to the screen, yeah, and everything in between. I think of that like it could vastly contribute to the wise and worthy acceleration of our technological dominance or lack thereof. It can take away from it if we don't do it. I think of it like there's to go back to the growth point. If you grow extremely fast in the wrong way, what happens is, yeah, you're going to have surgery or you're going to have chemo. I think this is um, the inevitable for amoral or immoral growth of these systems without any guidance. And so I think of it like what I'm seeing now is Anthropic uh, is working with my nonprofit. Some It's called Faith Family Technology Network. This is a friendly, sort of informal relationship right now, but we're working together on trying to bring the voices of religion and technology to bear on these systems. And at Microsoft, I co-founded the Technology for Religious Empowerment initiative with Glenn Weil, and this is what we think it's really the first initiative in the big tech industry, and that uh, made explicit one, the fact that we're empowering and partnering with religious organizations as technologists. Two, that we like want to listen, and we want to walk, talk, and listen. I've just had to do that. But we to with religious traditions, and those within them. And then I think there's this, and from a research perspective, right? Like real technical research. And then I think there's this certain thing where it's like this transformation is happening to religious organizations too. Like, how do you wisely help them navigate that? For this last one I'll say is like, can employees themselves be people of faith in working in AI and technology, and how do we help them there? So it's kind of a multifaceted ecosystem play. What I think, in order to bring this back to the inner development goals, is the people who really have learned how to inner develop are the people who should help both the people building these AI systems inner develop, and are the people that should create the, let's call it, the vibes, or the true kind of sense, or of true north of how to steer and align these systems. And so, like, I think that's what I found and loved in my work right now, where I've kind of transitioned from full-time technologist into, I'm now executive director of the Faith Family Technology Network.
Mhm.
And we bring together experts, we activate them across disciplines and professions and religions. We're multi-faith. We're here, and we're working, really deliberately and with haste and with passion on doing exactly what I just described. Is that, the experts are themselves, in many cases, religious leaders, or folks who are at the forefront of their field, plus people of faith, and are living that integration, that inner development out. So in order to get the ecosystem, we want the people who have done the inner development, or at least are quite along their way in that journey,
Hmm.
to speak back into the ecosystem and to work with the ecosystem.
Wow. And I really appreciate, you that you're doing that work in terms of um, collaboration and co-creation. I really think that's key in so many issues. And to start with where you can agree upon, and then push each other in making progress. So I really hope that this podcast, and thanks for the free commercial there, um, is by connecting people. So I'm connecting you to the listeners. We are connected, and I've also trying to weave questions from previous guests in the episodes. So I'm connecting you with, actually today, with two guests, and each guest has a question for you. Actually, the second guest has two questions. But the first guest is asking you.
My question for the next is, I guess, is how do you show up today?
Yeah. Thank you, first guest, who asked me this question. I'll pause. We have to pull from that place of stillness to answer some of these questions. Uh, Maybe that's part of my answer, is to be explicitly who you are is a freeing thing, and for me to be able to show up in the spaces, as this, yes, eclectic amalgam of traditions and practices and experiences and expertise, but uh, to be in my body, to speak from the heart, to be open and honest and ready and game for anything. That's how I'm showing up today, and that's maybe uh, I have a long way to go in the inner development goals, but I hope that gives you a sense of where I'm coming from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Guest number two has two questions for you. I'm asking, and then she said to me, "You can choose," but I'm going to ask them both because I think one is, you can relatively short. Okay, maybe. Okay, I put you under pressure because I'm asking you so many questions, but the first question she says she has for you is,
So I think for the next guest, I went back and forth. So you can choose. I had two questions that are very different, but I don't know what how you may feel. So I'll let you choose out of the two. I would either say from like a values-based question, it would be, in moments where they're dealing with kind of conflict management, what trait or value do they struggle with in that moment that they're trying to improve? So I would like more values based. Or if we're looking more forward looking for 2026, I would say this is just a fun one. Um, in 5 words, describe what 2026 looks like for you, or you aim to for it to look like, hope to achieve maybe.
So I'll pick the first one. I think there's something I've been learning about anger that's perhaps helpful to this guest or to your listeners. And I think of it like there's a justified anger. Let's say you're driving in traffic and somebody really comes close to hitting you or sideswiping your kids, or there's an anger there that is very good. Uh, it one it's justified in the moment because your the risk is so great, and then two, it also helps you act. Yeah, there's a adrenaline, there's a biological response, there's a psychological response, but I think of it like in the cases at work. uh Again, it's like this whole subtle rules the solid thing we talked about a little earlier from the Hermeticist tradition. That there's this um uh, there are lesser issues at play, but there are more subtle issues at play that have to deal with your pride, that have to deal with your ability to respond wisely in the moment, and very helpful. Uh, I, I don't want to speak. I want to speak to a specific moment in my very recent past, and yes, this happens, and I think of it like I just don't want to go there for the effect of the story, but I will give this advice. So I'm going to take the different tack, not storytelling, but just advice as in the case of where somebody's angering you at work, where somebody's angering you at home, or that sort of thing. Uh, it, it's it's my spiritual father and monks around him, we were talking about this, and it's like, okay, so number one, like focus on what uh, the good or the best qualities of this person is, or this the circumstance. Like, and you'll always find something. You'll always find some glimmer of that there, uh, and that shifts your attention. Like you can kind of play with that of like I'm getting super pissed and angry, but why am I here with this person? Like this person has these skills. This person has like it's not totally bad, and that it kind of breaks the cycle, just to just shift the lens over a little bit, and then it can break the anger. I think of it like that's been very helpful for me, and someone who struggled with that a lot. Yeah.
and I mean, my listeners know I often kind of cite a philosopher I like, Ken Wilber, and he says nobody can be wrong 100% of the time.
Yes, that's very well said. Nice.
So, what about the 5 words for 2026, Ben?
Oh goodness. Well, we're already we're a few months in, so
Uh-huh.
hurry up, don't wait, love. Something like that. Like we have a we that's counter to my pausing interstitial a freedom thing perhaps on the surface, but I think there's a lot of work to be done right now, on both the kind of missional things we've discussed, and
Uh-huh.
um if you have a dream right now, and this is like, I'm really working in my dream job, dream space here about this. I mentioned FFTN, but I'm also the founder and CEO of Interintelligence, which is this advisory consulting services company that
Uh-huh.
works in the interreligious and intergenerational space. So yeah, I think of it like, did I make that up? Yes, I made that up. You can go make stuff up too.
Okay. Um, Yeah, and music is very important to me. So I always have a question about music as well. And I told you, most guests find this the most difficult question. But if I ask you to come up with a song or a piece of music that for the big part embodies what you are about, what Ben is about, which piece of music or song would that be and why?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how many listeners pull up Spotify is what I want to know. But that's what I'm doing for a second. The piece of music, and I'll just pull up this album here. So there's this wonderful group in called Choir of the Monks of Shevatonia. Shevatonia is a monastery that blends traditions. So it has but not in a way that is syncretistic. It really brings them together. It has Catholic and Orthodox and Eastern Catholic kind of in the same buildings, or like adjacent buildings, and they practice, they stay true to their traditions, but they also come together and worship together too. So there's this beautiful harmony that happens in this chanting tradition. And I don't know how many hours I've listened to these albums by the Choir de Monks of Shivatonia, but it's probably in the thousands. I don't know. Sometimes I just put it on, I'll drive, and it's playing, and it's these harmonies that are really unique and striking, and I'm always discovering some kind of new corners of the tracks here. So perhaps I'll just offer up. I really like this. The Great Fast in my tradition. It's Lent. They have an album called Great Lent, mixing those words. But I just recommend any of, you can pick one of those, any songs in there and listen to the beauty. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And we will add that to a playlist that we have. If you go to Spotify, and I'm trying to move the whole list also to other, uh, companies out there, because Spotify is not great for the musicians.
Yeah.
But if you go to Spotify and you search for hashtag Walk Talk Listen, then you will find the songs that have been picked by my guests. So and it's an awesome list, very diverse. Um,
Wonderful.
Ben, these conversations always go fast. So if um, I still would like to ask you, um, what worries you most at the moment?
The issues right now with children are selfishly and maybe combined with perhaps more altruistic moments. The reason that I answered that way, I think uh, what we're doing with AI systems with kids ranges from terrible to experimental, at best at the moment. And so I'm not convinced that our youth should be using these systems as they're currently designed, except in very few kind of constrained cases. And I think of it like my friend Tim Estes has built a company called Angel IQ that is trying to do that in a way that provides a system that still constrains and makes things useful without making it harmful. But I think of it like, yeah, we're finding that out with the smartphone, is that don't give kids smartphones at age 7 or whatever, right? Like, of course, it's the number I think is is going up and up about when we should not. But I
Mhm.
think with AI systems, was just a big unknown because one, they're evolving so fast, and two, it takes years to do some of these studies that have real impact, and three, then lives will be lost, lives will be changed in ways we don't want. And so I'm personally being very careful with my children, but I think there's also this sense of like you don't want them to be left behind. So I get that tension,
Mhm.
and you can navigate that well, as wisely as you can with in community and discernment and practicing these inner development goals, of course. But yeah, I think there's this uh, real real concern most of us share in my circles
Hmm.
around that intersection. Yeah.
Okay. Where do you still see hope?
Well, so for one, I mean, I created Microsoft's first child safety initiative in generative AI. So I think it's like folks like myself we're trying to make a difference
Hmm.
inside those companies. Um, I see hope in that like there's advancement in both like political response. So there's uh, bills and there's protections being proposed. There's technical implementations to develop safeguards. There's classifiers that are evolving. It's like there's pieces of solutions in place. Age verification, for example, it's not perfect. It has gaps and holes. Like family safety controls in most platforms have gaps and holes. You can get around things fairly easily in most of them if you're a smart teenager. So like, I just think of it like the kids will do what they'll do, but I think there's hope in people who are pursuing both the inner development and the outer manifestations of that in these tech companies, in the political sphere, in the companies, the nonprofits that are doing just and wonderful work in response to uh, kind of fighting against not having these safeguards in place. So like I laud those many groups, and I think of it like yeah, it'll require a whole movement making for this just one thing, one of the issues among like the dozens and dozens. There's existential considerations, of course. There's alignment. That's something else we're working on at Faith Living Technology Network with Glenn and others. So I think we're not going to try to solve it all, but I think that yeah, like I'm worried about the child safety thing. One because I'm trying to take care of many things, I'm not as focused on that. But two, it's just it is a complicated and tough problem, uh, and kids should not be experimented on. And I'm worried that's what's happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to thank you for today's conversations, Ben. I mean, your willingness to talk with me, for everything you do, for who you are. Um, yeah, before we close, is there any question that I did not ask you today that I should have asked you?
No, I've just been very open and in the flow with you, so I don't think I have anything coming to mind. So appreciate you bringing me on.
Okay, cool. Then, yeah, I wish you all the best with everything you do. And yeah, I really encourage people to check out your website as well and to see what you're doing. Very important work. And yeah, thanks again and all the best.
Absolutely. Maurice. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram.